while electricity has been prioritized over water in terms of political significance, experts warn that water is a constitutional human right that requires proper planning and financing. The government has neglected water infrastructure, leading to a breakdown of institutional memory and the ability of institutions to function. My co-anchor Gareth Edwards is in Hammanskraal, north of Pretoria, and where the devastating cholera outbreak is continuing, and we keep a focus there on. Good morning again, Gareth. Over to you in terms, what the latest developments are, the experts that we'll be speaking to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Cindy. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Hammanskraal. The sun is beginning to rise. It's getting a little bit warmer, but I'm afraid that's where the good news ends. You mentioned failing infrastructure, Cindy. You're right. Not just water, which is our two-day focus beginning today, and that ailing infrastructure. You would also have seen, I'm sure maybe we'll show you a bit later, the road condition behind me. The residents here also dealing with very bad potholes. But beyond that, as we came to air this morning at 6 o'clock, we also went into load shedding and the blackouts kicking in for this part of Hammanskraal as well. So it's not a good day to be a resident of Hammanskraal. To remind you, if you've only just joined us, the total death toll from the cholera outbreak, 23 people have lost their lives here in Hammanskraal, one in the Free State. There are fears that this could very well get worse. All of this is blamed on ailing and the ailing infrastructure that has been a problem for more than a decade. This area alone, we've seen multiple protests over the years, multiple politicians coming through, and nothing so far seems to make much of a difference. But it seems, according to the Tshwane Mayor and the Minister of Water and Sanitation, they do have a plan in place. Here is the question, though: is that plan good enough? Let's bring in water expert, water scientist, Professor Anthony Turton, making time for me this morning. Prof, good morning to you, and I really appreciate you joining us this morning. The ailing infrastructure we're talking about, you and I have done many, many interviews, and you were talking about this problem probably close to a decade ago, and now here we are. Could we have prevented this, do you think? Good morning.
Good morning to you and the listeners. Without any question of doubt, we could have prevented this. And if you've been following anything that I've been saying in the media, I've been constantly beating the drum about a thing called a root cause analysis. We need to do a root cause analysis, but for some reason government does not to do that. They don't want to do a root cause analysis. And why don't they want to do that? Because it's actually not the ailing infrastructure that's causing the problem. That is a manifestation of the problem. The root cause of all of that is the fact that the procurement systems in the different municipalities have been essentially hijacked by syndicates, and therefore they are directing the flow of cash out of those the coffers into their private bank accounts, etc., by getting contracts for politically connected people. So the manifestation of the problem is the failing infrastructure, but the root cause of the problem is in fact this criminalization or the capture of the procurement process. So therefore, and this is important what I want to say now, therefore, just to simply throw another 2 billion rand at the problem is not going to solve the problem. Why? Because that 2 billion rand is merely going to be redirected into the coffers of the politically connected people. And this is what always happens. This is where we saw exactly the same thing happening in the Mfuleni wastewater works, where about 3 billion rand was spent on trying to fix the sewage works there in the Vereeniging area, and guess what? They're still dysfunctional to this very day. So after 3 billion rand, not one iota of change has been brought about, and exactly the same is going to happen in the Hammanskraal case, but we will have spent 2.5 billion rand on solving a perceived problem without doing a root cause analysis. So we need to do a root cause analysis.
And based on what you're saying, Prof, as well, it seems that the problem is fairly well known. We've seen extra security being brought in for the electricity, the power stations there. As well, we were also hearing those reports, I'm sure you remember, with Andre de Ruyter, the former Eskom CEO, during that interview with Annika Larsen, saying that there are syndicates operating at the electricity level as well. We then had the president coming out and saying they're going to do more to protect power stations and get on top of any kinds of syndicates. How do we begin, though, to try and fix that problem? That's a much broader problem, this root cause that you speak of. But at the same time, we have residents here in Hammanskraal dying. Many, many more are sick while we try and sort out the syndicates and the politicking and the leaking money, if you will. Is there anything short-term, whatever that short-term looks like, that can be done in Hammanskraal?
Well, yes, so we have to, once again, understand exactly what the nature of the problem is. You see, we can be very, very energetic and beat our chest, and we can really be looking terribly busy and looking like we're actually doing something important, but we're doing the wrong thing. My information from people on the ground is that the problem is not from the drinking water, but it's from tankers. So we need to understand how those tankers work, and we need to understand where the tankers get their water from, because that's the root cause of the problem. Once again, the root cause analysis. So until such time as we actually understand the exact nature of what we're dealing with in a complex engineered system, we can be doing lots and lots of things, but they're not necessarily the right things. So we've got to start understanding, yes, of course we have to stabilize the thing in the first place, and obviously we have to lament the loss of human life, and obviously we must prevent all of that from happening in the immediate short term. But in the long term, we have to turn the ship around, and we can only do that by really fully understanding what's at the bottom of this. And I would venture to suggest that if we continue with the same procurement processes as we have, for example, in Rooiwal, where since 2001 there's been an embedded syndicate there. 2001 they started digging themselves into to the procurement process at Rooiwal. We're not going to just get that thing unentangled in the meantime, and it's my understanding that the syndicate that is embedded in Rooiwal is also linked to other parts of the country, other municipalities or other sectors that have been captured. So it is a big thing. It's a big, complex, sophisticated thing, and it requires actually the SIU to investigate this thing. It requires a proper forensic investigation at the highest possible level, fully resourced. Then and only then are we actually going to start making progress. Otherwise, we're just going to constantly repeat the Mfuleni case. We're going to throw 3 billion rand at the problem, and people will forget about it after the dust cloud is settled, and we will be no closer to any viable long-term solution. And let me just say one more thing. Yes, while water is a human rights issue, as was said in the lead, yes, it is a human rights issue, but it actually goes even beyond that. Water and energy are both the foundation of our economy. If we cannot stabilize both water and energy in South Africa, we cannot hope to attract any capital. Therefore, we cannot hope to grow any more jobs in the future. Therefore, we are dooming society to a life of servitude and destitution for the next generation. And in my professional opinion, and as a citizen and a taxpayer, this is simply unacceptable.
Professor Anthony Turton, thank you very much indeed for making time for us this morning, raising a number of issues, doesn't the good Prof, about what is actually going on. Yes, we're talking about a cholera outbreak. Yes, we're talking about water conditions and water quality. Yes, we're talking about this infrastructure which has been ailing, as we hear, since 2001 in this area. This is the result of all of it. There's much, much bigger problems as well. There's even been calls for a state of disaster on this. It doesn't seem we're there yet. Perhaps the question for later in the show is, should that be where we're going, a state of disaster? My thanks very much to Professor Anthony Turton joining us this morning, a well-known water expert, and we'll be having many more interviews about this and what is day one of our two-day focus on water in South Africa, water quality and failing water infrastructure. Back here again in Hammanskraal a little bit later.